Okay, so what I wanted to do here is go through the steps of actually creating a floor plan. I have a floor plan here. I'm going to go and pull that up really quickly. And I've broken this floor plan up kind of into two parts. Normally, we would not see a floor plan broken up in this way. We would pretty much just see a floor plan that is a mixture of the two. But I broke this floor plan up because I think for the very first time, especially people who are just starting off with looking at floor plans, how do we draw and how do we model with the floor plan? I think it's really good to understand or to begin to view the floor plan as kind of a two-step process. When I'm doing a floor plan, I will typically start with the exterior first, make sure that all of my dimensions are correct, making sure that the form and the shape of the building is done correctly and that all of the dimensions match. If all of the dimensions are correct on the exterior, then I'll go ahead and move on the interior. And one of the benefits of doing modeling in this way is that if you end up making a mistake on the interior, well, you know that the exterior is already correct. So the mistake means that you're going to have to make changes to the interior walls. When you do both of them simultaneously at the same time, when you find a mistake, you then have to go and try to figure out, well, is my interior wall wrong or is my exterior wall modeled incorrectly, right? So you have to kind of do more digging and more research and trying to figure out, well, where is the problem? When you start with only the exterior first, then you can kind of isolate the problems and say, okay, the problem is only exterior, so it's somewhere within one of these walls. And then you zero in when you start working on the interiors. So that's why I've broken up the floor plan into two kind of drawings, just so that we can begin to understand it a little bit differently. And this is how I typically will go about modeling something: exterior first, then interiors. Okay. Now for this exercise, I'm just going to start very simple. Okay, simple in the sense of choosing the walls. Right now, what I really care about is just making sure that I get comfortable with building walls and that match the dimensions on the drawings. As we progress, we'll go ahead and experiment with different wall types, with different location lines, things that kind of complicate the process a little bit more. But right now, we're going to keep it plain and simple. So I'm going to go ahead and start up a new project. I'm going to go to New, Browse, and Residential. I'll hit OK. So for this assignment, I'm going to use the 8-inch generic wall and for the exterior and a 4-inch generic wall for the interior. So I'll go ahead and start off going with wall. It's set to basic wall generic 6. I'm going to go to generic 8. Now, if you want to use generic 8-inch masonry, it really doesn't matter because, again, this is just an exercise to create a floor plan. We're really not talking about walls, wall types, things like that. What I care about is that the wall itself is 8 inches. Now, really quickly, just to explain these generic walls, you'll notice that these generic walls have nothing inside of them. They are just kind of a mass, okay? We use these generic walls in the design process to just kind of get started. Think of it as a conceptual design. We're really not thinking too much about materials yet. We're not thinking too much about what this thing is ultimately going to be and how we're going to construct it. Right now, we're really just thinking about organization, layout, schematic design in general. So sometimes we just need to model something really quickly. And that's when these generic walls come in really handy. So I'm going to start off with a generic wall. And I'm going to set my location line to the finished face. Okay. Now, we've talked about location lines, and I keep explaining that we set our location lines based on our dimensions if we're going to follow a floor plan with dimensions. So if I take a look at this floor plan, if I zoom in, you'll see that all of my dimensions are to the exterior side, okay? And so that's the finish face on the exterior side. Let me quickly go over to my interiors because that's going to make, this is where we're going to have to pay a little bit more attention. So you'll notice some of them are, I guess, on one side, they kind of vary, right? So let's keep that in mind when we're doing the interiors. But right now for exteriors, it's all on the exterior side. So when I go back to Revit, I'm going to select my location line, finish face exterior. I'm going to set base constraint first floor and top constraint. Let's go up to, let's just go up to second floor. Okay. Now I'm going to follow this floor plan. And when I follow a floor plan, I typically pick a corner. Let's see. I'll typically pick a corner, either the top right corner or the bottom left corner, or just pick a starting point. And then whichever starting point I choose, I will work kind of in a clock. What's that word? Oh my God. Clockwise direction, right? So I don't jump around. So I'll go up, I'll start here at this bottom corner, I'll go up, and I'll just move all the way around the building. Do not go, you could go counterclockwise if you want to. The point being is that whichever direction you go, you keep moving in that direction and you don't go back and make those changes just yet. Okay, so we're gonna get started. I'm going to start at the bottom left corner here. Let's get over to Revit. Now I'll typically start off anywhere within these 4 elevation points. Okay. And I'm going to just start, click, and I'm going to go up and I'm going to type in 25 space 8. And look at that. I already made that mistake that I talked about when I was talking about creating those walls. Let's start over. That when I move my cursor, I have a new cursor, so it's really sensitive. I'm gonna have to just get used to that. Make sure that when you go up and you take your hand off to enter the dimension, 25 space 8, before you hit enter, take another look at the wall and just make sure that it is going vertically or that it is 90 degrees the way you want it. So now I'll hit enter. Okay. Then I'm going to cut across and I'm going to take a look at that dimension, and that says 6 feet 4. So 6 space 4, enter. And then I'm going to go up and I'm going to say 12, enter. Okay. I'm going to cut across. Notice I have chain selected. And I'm going to go, I'm purposely going to make a mistake here. Okay. So that we can go and figure out how we fix mistakes down the line. So here what I'll do is let's go 17 feet 8. Okay, although the dimensions say 18 feet 8, I'll say 17 feet 8, enter. And I'm going to come down, and that's 23 8. Then I'll go back this way. This is 10 feet. I'll come straight down, 14 feet. And now across, and that's 15 feet. Okay. Now when I come all the way across, I notice that something's wrong. All right. This should have met. This should have been cornered off. Right. Now we already know where the mistake is, but let's say we didn't know. When you start at one corner and you move all the way around, you should, and you're following dimensions, you should be able to end back exactly where you started. And if you don't, or as you're moving along, somewhere along the line, one wall is longer than it should be, or if it's shorter than it should be, then it means you have a problem. Okay. And at that point, that's when you want to stop. The minute you realize that you have a mistake, that's when you want to stop and try to figure out where that mistake is. Okay. So what I would do in this situation is I'd kind of go back, I would go back to where I started and start clicking on walls. Okay. And I would work in either counterclockwise or clockwise direction. And I'd check each dimension. Now we could do that in one of 2 ways. I could use the dimension tool right up here, set my location line to wall faces and run a dimension there, and I can check it, 25.8. Okay. And I could keep moving along that way. All right. The problem with this method is that when you use these dimensions, they're permanent. So once I'm done, I essentially, at some point, I'm going to have to go back and delete them. Okay, because we're not ready to dimension just yet. So these dimensions were really just to figure out where the problem is. The other thing you can do is use these temporary dimensions. Okay, now the upside to the temporary dimensions is that they're temporary. So I'm not going to have to go back and delete them. The downside, oh, you know what? I did not set my temporary dimensions though. The downside to the temporary dimensions, that's as I'm talking, let me change these. Temporary dimensions. We'll go to faces, openings, and okay. All right, so now the downside to the temporary dimensions is that I'm going to have to make a change. I'm going to have to adjust these temporary dimensions every single time. So this right here tells me it's 25 feet 4, but that's to the center. So now I'm going to have to click and drag and move this across over here. And that says it's 25 feet 8. Okay. So then that means that this wall is correct. Remember, when we're looking at dimensions, we're not trying, we don't go by selecting the wall, right? Because this wall is created by, it's connecting this distance, right? So that's why we have to select one of these walls in order to determine what the length of this wall is. So by selecting this one, I can check that this wall is 25 feet 8, which is in fact correct. Then from here, I would click on the next wall. And I would select on this temporary dimension, move it to this side and say, okay, that's 6 feet 4. So that's correct. I would move to this one. And then looking at the temporary dimensions, I'd move this one over here to this side and move this one here, and that's 12 feet. So that's correct. So as I'm using these temporary dimensions, before I even take a look at the dimension, I'm adjusting the dimension to match the locations of where the dimensions were taken from the PDF, from the actual drawing. Okay. Then I make sure that they match. Again, you could use the temporary dimensions or these permanent dimensions. And now I'll click on the next wall. And so this one is from there to there, and that's 17 feet 8. And that's where I know the problem lies. Okay. So now I know that this is the wall that is off. And it is this wall that I have selected that needs to change. Okay. It's not this wall. It is not this wall. We do not want to move this wall over to the left to make this 18 feet 8 inches. If we do this, if we move this wall to the left, then that means that the 6 foot 4 is going to change. And that we don't want. Okay. So that's why I say start in one corner and move all the way around, because not only are you going to eventually find the problem, but you're also going to know which wall to select that needs to move. Okay. So now that I know that this wall is the one that needs to move, I can go ahead and come into the temporary dimensions, just click once, type in 18 space 8 and enter. Okay. Now I could do one of two things. We could keep going, and I know that that distance is correct, 23 feet. But now this distance is going to be incorrect. All right. This is now, let's go ahead and move this over. This is now 11 feet when it should be 10 feet. Now, the reason why that changed is because we changed this wall. We moved this wall to the right, which made this dimension correct, right? From here to there, correct. But by moving this wall, we also changed the distance from here, from this wall to that wall. So that's why this length here is incorrect. Okay. So we can take this wall and change this down to 10 feet. Okay. But if we feel confident, and if we want to, we could actually select both of these walls, because if I move this wall over, then obviously this wall itself is also going to need to change. Okay. So I could select both of these walls, and I do that by doing a cross window. So that's simply left clicking the mouse, holding down on the cursor, and letting go once I do a cross window around those two objects. And now I could use the move tool. So we can move this. So I click on the move tool or type MV on the keyboard. I'll go ahead and click on where I want to grab the object. I'll move it in the direction I want to go, and then I'll enter a distance, which is going to be 1 foot. So I'll just hit 1, enter. Okay. And now we have the correct distance. So that's 10 feet. And this bottom one, if we change the temporary dimensions from outside to outside, gives us 15 feet. And that's correct. Okay. So now we know that the exterior is correct. Okay. The next step is to now move on to the interior. So let's take a quick look at the interiors. Now the interiors, we're going to have to pay much more attention to the dimensions. Okay. So pick a wall and start looking at where and how you can, where the dimension is taken from. Okay. Now in this dimension, or in this general layout, and typically when you're looking at interior walls, there is a pattern, there is a system, or there is a thought process. We have to decipher and figure that thought process out. Depending on who drew it, we have to kind of figure out what were they thinking. And if it's a good drawer, if someone who drew it is good, then they should have a system in place that should be kind of somewhat decipherable. This is where you begin to see people who are good at drawing and those who don't have as much experience. So if we take a look at this dimension, this right here kind of tells us right off the bat. This dimension is taken from the exterior to the far side of this one interior wall. The next one is taken from this far side of the interior wall to this far side of the interior wall. And the next dimension taken from this far side of the wall to back out to the exterior, to the far side exterior. Okay. So that would mean that generally speaking, these dimensions should be taken, all of these dimensions should be taken from one far side to the other far side. Okay. So if we look at this one, that's correct as well. Now that's not always going to be the case. Okay. That's just kind of a general rule of thumb. So if we take a look at this dimension, it's the same thing from one far side to the far side of this wall, far side of this wall to the far side of that wall. But now this 5-foot dimension, okay, that's kind of from the inside of the wall to the far side of this wall, right? Depending on how you look at it, I guess you could say. So this is going to be a tricky one. And the reason why this is the way that it is because this outside line here, let me zoom in so I'm very clear what I'm talking about. This line right there is the line that was being dimensioned previously. So when you dimension, you want to be consistent that you start a new dimension at the same place that you left off on a previous dimension. Okay. And then we have this dimension over here that's outside to outside. And then we have this weird wall that just stops. Okay. So what I honestly will do is start with the easiest thing first. Okay. And save the complicated stuff till the end. Now, as you're just starting off, it might all seem like complicated, but just start with the stuff you're comfortable with. Okay. So I'm going to start off with these walls here. And then I know I can just draw a wall that is aligned to this exterior wall that goes vertical. So that's what we're going to work on. So let's go over to my floor plan. We'll go architecture wall. Now these are interior walls, so I'm going to use the generic 4-inch. Make sure location line, finish face, exterior, first floor 0, 0, level up to second floor. That all stays the same. Okay. So now I'm going to click on this corner. Okay. Now on this wall, when you start, Revit takes a guess as to kind of which side of the finish face are you do you want to move towards. So right here, if you take a look, you'll notice that this wall is actually not going to be aligned with this exterior wall. So I need to flip that wall. So I can simply do that by hitting the space bar, and that's going to allow me to flip that wall. Now the thing is, I don't know how high up this wall goes. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is, I mean, I could do the math, but what's easier is I'll just do a wall that goes up to about there. Okay. I'll then do another wall. Now this horizontal wall here is 7 feet 2 inches. Okay. I can use the offset tool. So let's go wall. I can use the offset tool, or I could also just draw a wall. Not really looking or caring about the distance. Okay, I'll hit the escape key twice to get out. Let's click on this wall, set the temporary dimension to where the dimension is on the floor plan. And so that's from outside to outside. And now I'll go ahead and change this to 7 feet. Sorry, this is 7 feet 2. And now I know that this one wall is in place. And now I could take this wall. Notice how we have two kind of grip points here, or two different size grip points. One is for the temporary dimension. The bigger one belongs to the wall. And you'll see grip points at both ends of the wall. So now I'll go ahead and click and drag and just bring this right up. And there we have our walls. Okay. Now the next one that I'm missing is right here. So let's go with walls. Another 4-inch. Okay. And now this one, let's actually use the offset. So last time I just drew a wall and used a temporary dimension. This is now the time to experiment and explore what works for you, which kind of method, which strategy works best for you, which one you feel more comfortable with. So here what I'm going to do is type in 6 feet, because that's the distance of this next wall. And that is 6 feet from the inside here. So let's go here. I could hit the space bar again, so that's going to flip the direction. And we'll go there. I'll go back and double check this. Oops. And this is from outside to outside. Let's double check that temporary dimension. Okay. It's easy. Let me undo that if I can. Oops. 1 minute here. So let's do that again. 6 feet. Okay. It's easy to freak out and say, wait a minute, this is supposed to be 6 feet, right? I did it at 6 feet. Why is it not working? Well, we have to pay attention to that temporary dimension. So before we freak out, make sure that the temporary dimension is set correctly. Is that correctly? Nope. See, that's not even correct. That's from this side. All right, there we go. So now we know that that's correct. All right, so now that we have that, let's create some walls down here. The way I would go about this, my preferred strategy is to sketch it out and then adjust with the temporary dimension. So that's what I'm going to do. But if you want to explore more with the offset, then go ahead and do that. Okay. So I'm going to just click, 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 not paying attention to any of the dimensions. And then I'll go ahead and select, hit the escape key to get out. Select this wall, make sure that I set my temporary dimensions correctly and to the correct location. And then I'll type in 9 space 6. Let's also move this one. And this one is 14 feet 6. And this is from outside to outside as well. So let's go. Oops. All right, so I just made a mistake. You'll notice that all of a sudden, this temporary dimension turned white. Okay. So if you accidentally hit this button here, then it turns it into a permanent dimension. okay, which is similar to using this this command up here. Now, that's if you hit the red button. Oftentimes, it's pretty easy to just kind of move the cursor around it. But when we're talking about small dimensions, right, and we're zoomed out, it's very easy to, I mean, look at the difference when I move that cursor between the dot and the permanent dimension. It's very easy for the cursor to pick up the permanent dimension. So let's go ahead and delete this. We could select it and then just use the delete key on the keyboard, and we'll start over. And this time I will get in closer. We'll move it this way, move this there, and then we'll go 14 space 6. And then I'll select this, and this is 5 feet. Oh, no, I don't have a dimension here. Okay. Let's take a look at that really quickly. How do we get this wall? How far do I know? How far is this wall from here? Okay. When we're looking at architectural drawings, and this is more for larger buildings or just kind of larger floor plans, we run out of space to add dimensions. So sometimes you have to figure out how you found this, or how am I supposed to find the distance for this one dimension here, or for this one wall. So if I take a look, this wall here is aligned to this wall here, which I know this wall here is 7 feet away, okay, from the exterior side. I also know that this wall is aligned to this wall, okay? So that's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and test that out. I'm going to use the align tool. So if I remember that shortcut, that's AL. It's already set to wall faces. And I'm going to zoom in. We have thin lines, we have, and of course it does not want to work for me right now. All right, so a little trick is that if I move my cursor over the line that I want to select, so I'm just hovering over it. I'm not clicking on anything. I just move the cursor right over it. If I hit the tab key on the keyboard, it'll select what is below my cursor, okay? So that sometimes will activate the line, okay? So again, we move our cursor over that line. It doesn't have to be exactly over, but just really close so that Revit recognizes that that's what you want. And then just hit the tab key on the keyboard, okay? I'm not hitting anything on the cursor, just the tab key on the keyboard, okay? And then I'll click. Now remember, the key with the align tool is that the first click is what you want to align to, and the second click is what you want to move. So now I'm going to come over here, use the tab key, and then click. Okay? And that's going to align it. Now I could also, let me hit the escape key to get out. I can now click on this wall, set my temporary dimensions correctly, and it's 7 feet. Okay. And then lastly is going to be that one odd wall. What I'm going to do here, we're going to run into a problem. I'm going to type in, I'm going to create a wall here. Now I don't know the exact length, so I just drew a wall straight down. Okay. The reason why we don't know the exact length is because this wall, if we look at the dimensions, is 7 feet 4 inches, but it's 7 feet 4 inches from the exterior side. And when I draw a wall, I drew it from the interior side. So I could do the math and say, okay, 7 feet 4 minus 8 inches is 6 foot 8. So therefore the distance of this wall is 6 foot 8. So I could do that, right? I do not rely on my math skills. My math skills are not the best, and with all this technology, I shouldn't have to rely on my math skills because people make mistakes. So instead what I did is just drew a wall, without paying attention to the dimension. And then we'll, oops. You'll notice that we do not have the grip points, right? The little dots here on this temporary dimension. We have them here, but we don't have them here. And that's because this is not a continuous wall. This is a wall that abruptly stops, okay? So what I end up doing in situations like this is I end up creating a kind of a fake wall or line that I can use as a reference point, okay? The way I do that is by using the line command or just the letters LI. I could also go up to annotate, and I could use the detail line. Okay, if you prefer using the ribbon window and hunting down commands, okay, which is DL, which is very similar. So I go over to modify. Oh, I don't have any of the drawings in here just yet. Okay, so LI is a shortcut key for a line. We could also use detail line, which does the same exact. They don't do the same exact thing, but what we want, it'll do the same exact thing. Later on, we'll talk more in depth about detail lines and model lines and what are the differences, okay? But for what we need right now, we could use either one. So either use DL or LI. I'm gonna come straight down. Oops. Start this again. I'm going to come straight down from the exterior side, come straight down, 7 feet 4, and then just draw a line at 90 degrees. Okay. And now what I have is align to align tool. So I'll use the align tool, AL. I click on this line, click on this line, and now that brought this wall straight down to where it needs to be. I'll then just select both of these and hit the delete key. If I want to check my work, I would use a permanent dimension. Okay? From there to there, 7 feet 4. The reason why I would use a permanent dimension and not a temporary dimension is because, again, if I click on this, okay, it does not give me, the temporary dimension does not give me the ability to adjust the location lines. Okay? So that's why I need to use a permanent dimension to double check it. So that's how we go about kind of, that's kind of the general steps of drawing a floor plan. Now, floor plans become much more complicated. There's more rooms, there's more angles, there's more turns. We haven't really talked about doors and windows, things like that. But generally speaking, this is how we go about adding walls. Okay? Hope this helps you guys out.